I retired, but my wife's toast left me questioning everything I thought I knew about us. The night of my retirement party started like a dream I didn't quite know I'd earned. The room was softly lit with amber string lights that cast a warm glow across the faces of colleagues, friends, and family. The air smelled faintly of roasted meats and delicate pastries, mingling with the subtle floral notes of the centerpiece arrangements. I could hear laughter bubbling through conversations, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of background music that somehow made the room feel both festive and intimate at the same time. I walked in, heart a little tight, trying to shake off the small knot of anxiety that had been following me all week. At 27, retiring from my first real job felt surreal. Pride mingled with the unease of being in a room full of people I respected, all of whom had their own expectations. I smiled, greeted a few faces, shook hands, and allowed the congratulatory pats on the back to wash over me. But no matter how much I tried to focus on the crowd, my attention kept drifting toward her. My wife stood near the center of the room, graceful in a way that seemed effortless yet commanding. She wore a dark emerald dress that caught the lights with every subtle movement, the fabric flowing gently over her silhouette. Her hair framed her face perfectly, and when she laughed, it felt like the whole room shifted closer, as if drawn by her warmth. There was something magnetic about her tonight, something that made even the people around her seem to recede into the background. As I watched her, a twinge of unease crept in, subtle but persistent. She laughed at jokes I didn't hear, exchanged quick glances with colleagues, and I noticed the way her hand occasionally brushed against one of them, nothing overt, just fleeting touches that somehow felt louder than the music in my ears. I told myself it was nothing, that this was just her charm, her social ease. But even as I reassured myself, the tiny pang of jealousy lingered, sharpening my awareness of every interaction she had tonight. I tried to anchor myself in the celebration. The caterers were passing trays of hors d'oeuvres, the fizz of champagne glasses punctuated the toasts, and the room carried a collective warmth, a mix of pride, nostalgia, and camaraderie. I caught snippets of conversations, jokes about office politics, and stories of my early days at the company, all of which made me smile. Yet, amid all the festivity, I felt a quiet distance growing between me and the woman I'd loved for years. She was radiant, confident, and beautiful, and for the first time I felt both proud and insecure. The subtle shift in her attention tonight, the effortless way she moved through the room, made me hyper-aware of myself, of her, of the tension I didn't know was building. I sipped my champagne, tasting the sharp sweetness against my tongue, and wondered if I was imagining things, or if this night would mark the first moment I would have to confront feelings I'd been brushing aside for too long. Tonight, the celebration was supposed to be mine. And yet, as I watched her laugh across the room, I realized that something had shifted, quietly, imperceptibly, but unmistakably, and that this night was only the beginning. The moment came sooner than I expected. My wife rose from her chair, a glass of champagne in hand, and the room instinctively hushed. The soft hum of conversation faded as every pair of eyes turned toward her. She had that quiet authority tonight, the kind that made everyone lean in without realizing it, drawn to her presence like a magnet. I felt my chest tighten, part pride, part anxiety, as I watched her scan the room, smile bright, and raise her glass. "My friends, colleagues, and loved ones," she began, her voice smooth and steady, "tonight we celebrate someone very special, my husband, a man whose dedication and perseverance have inspired us all." My chest lifted slightly at the acknowledgement, the warmth of her words brushing against me like sunlight. I could feel the buzz of validation, the kind you can almost taste. Then, almost casually, she added, "And I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone else, my boss, the man who holds the power and has guided me through challenges I never thought I could face." The words landed like a cold wave. My hand tightened around my glass, champagne spilling slightly over the rim. I forced a laugh, trying to keep the moment from unraveling inside me. The room clapped politely, but my focus narrowed, her eyes lingered on him just a beat too long, her hand brushing lightly against his arm as she spoke. Nothing overt, just a fleeting gesture, but in that instant, my mind overanalyzed it all. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself that admiration for a boss was normal. I told myself she loved me, that this was professional respect. And yet, a small knot of jealousy formed, growing quietly, gnawing at the edges of my pride. I remembered the way she used to glance at me like that, intense, intimate, and now it was directed elsewhere, professional though it might be. The toast ended, and applause rippled through the room. Guests exchanged smiles, some whispering compliments about her eloquence. I forced a smile too, but inside, I was swimming through a mix of emotions, pride, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name. There was a tension now in the air, subtle but palpable, a silent chord struck between admiration, desire, and unease. I watched her return to her seat, laughing lightly at a colleague's joke, and the sight should have reassured me. But the warmth of her presence now carried a subtle edge, a reminder that she was not mine alone in the way I had always felt. I could feel the pulse of my heart, the prickling awareness of every gesture she made, every subtle movement. The soft glint of her bracelet catching the light, the tilt of her head as she listened, the curve of her lips in polite amusement, every detail sharpened, exaggerated by my own growing sensitivity. That night, the celebration I thought was solely about me became a lens through which I saw the complexity of our relationship. The toast didn't just honor achievements, it revealed unspoken dynamics, quiet tensions, and the first tremors of emotional conflict that would shape the rest of the evening. I sipped my champagne, the bubbles tickling my tongue, and wondered, had I misread her for years, or was this just the first crack in a window I didn't know existed? After the toast, the room felt different. The soft hum of conversations and laughter was still there, but I sensed a subtle shift in the air, a quiet tension that hadn't been there before. I tried to focus on the small details, the shimmer of the chandeliers, the clink of glasses, the laughter of my coworkers sharing stories about my early career. Yet no matter how much I tried, my gaze kept returning to her. She moved through the crowd with her usual grace, confident and composed, yet tonight there was something else, a slight leaning in when speaking to her colleagues, a fleeting brush of her hand on a shoulder here, a laugh that lingered a moment longer than necessary there. Nothing overt, nothing inappropriate, yet each gesture seemed amplified in my perception. I felt a tight knot of unease form in my chest, growing with each step she took away from me. I found myself analyzing everything, the tilt of her head as she listened, the way her eyes sparkled under the warm lighting, the subtle warmth radiating from her when she laughed. Every little detail became a clue, a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. I told myself it was nothing, that she was simply being her charming, articulate self, the woman I had admired since the day we met. And yet, the tiny pang of jealousy wouldn't leave me, a quiet whisper reminding me that admiration from others could feel like a shadow in our shared space. I drifted to a corner, sipping my champagne more for distraction than enjoyment. The bubbles tickled my tongue, the slight bite of alcohol grounding me in the present. I watched her from afar, noticing the subtle ways her body language communicated comfort and ease with those around her. A hand resting lightly on an arm, a lean toward someone as if drawn by their conversation. I caught glimpses of the boss she had toasted, they shared a brief, polite laugh, an exchange so subtle it could have gone unnoticed by anyone else, yet to me, it was a jolt I couldn't ignore. The sensation was strange, pride in seeing her shine, admiration for the woman I loved, mixed with a quiet anxiety I hadn't expected. I realized how much I valued the intimacy we shared, the private understanding we'd built over years. Seeing her navigate the room, so radiant and self-assured, brought both warmth and a subtle ache, a reminder of how easily dynamics can shift, even for a moment. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm air of the room settle around me, mingled with the faint scent of her perfume, soft and familiar yet somehow sharper tonight. It was as if every sensory detail had been magnified, the sparkle of her dress under the lights, the music brushing softly against the edges of conversation, the tactile memory of her hand in mine, all of it highlighting the distance that had crept in during this one evening. By the time the night moved on to casual mingling and laughter, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about infidelity, nor about anyone else. It was about perception, about awareness, and about the subtle ways emotional intimacy can be challenged, even by admiration, even by fleeting gestures. And in that quiet realization, I also understood that the night was far from over. This tension, this observation, was just the first step toward a deeper understanding of her, of me, and of the invisible threads that connected us. As the party carried on, laughter and music filling the room, I found myself quietly stepping away. My glass felt heavy in my hand, the champagne tasting sharper than before, almost metallic, and the warmth of the crowded room only heightened the tension coiling inside me. I needed a moment, a breath of space, and, more than anything, a chance to understand what I had been feeling. She noticed almost immediately, her eyes flicking toward me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Come with me," she said softly, and I followed her out to the small balcony at the back of the venue. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of nearby flowers and the distant hum of city life. It was a stark contrast to the warm, bustling energy inside, and it offered a quiet refuge, a space where the conversation we both needed could unfold without interruption. We stood side by side, the soft glow of string lights tracing the outline of her profile. I could feel her presence in a way that was impossible in the crowd, the subtle warmth radiating from her, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the way her hair occasionally brushed against my shoulder as she adjusted her stance. It was intimate, comforting, yet charged with unspoken questions. I started, fumbling slightly, my voice betraying the tension I'd been carrying all evening. "I wasn't expecting your toast." It caught me off guard. My words felt clumsy, heavy with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. She turned to me then, her eyes soft but clear, her hand brushing against mine, accidental, fleeting, yet grounding. "I know," she said quietly, her tone steady. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to acknowledge him. He's guided me at work in ways I couldn't have managed alone." Her honesty was like a cool breeze, soothing the tightness in my chest. But the mixture of relief and residual tension made my next words hesitant. "It's not that I don't understand," I admitted. "It's just, seeing that side of you, the admiration, the ease, it made me realize how much I notice everything about you." Her hand lingered near mine, the subtle proximity sending a warmth that traveled down my arm. She tilted her head slightly, a small, knowing smile playing at her lips. "And," she prompted gently, her voice inviting, patient. "Anne, I guess it made me realize I haven't said enough lately. About how much I appreciate you. How proud I am of you. Of us." I felt a small relief bloom inside me, a quiet lifting of the tension that had been knotting my thoughts all evening. For a moment, we just stood there, the soft night air around us, hands almost touching, our proximity speaking more than words ever could. I could feel her heartbeat, steady and calm, and in that simple, quiet connection, the lingering discomfort of the party faded. She laughed softly, a warm, melodic sound that made the tension in my chest release like steam. "Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that. And you. You deserve to be celebrated too, for everything you've done, and for everything we've shared." The night seemed to hold its breath, giving us a private moment of intimacy amidst the celebration. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet acknowledgement of our bond, a brush of hands, the lingering closeness, and a sense of understanding that needed no more words. By the time we returned inside, the earlier unease had softened. The tension of the toast hadn't vanished completely, but it had been reshaped, transformed into awareness, affection, and the beginnings of deeper connection. Tonight, the celebration had become more than just a party, it was a mirror, reflecting not just accomplishments, but the delicate, intricate threads that held us together. After our quiet moment on the balcony, I re-entered the party feeling, strangely untethered. The noise of the room, once overwhelming, now seemed distant, like a muted soundtrack to my thoughts. I held my glass loosely, the champagne inside warm and slightly flat against my tongue, and I watched her laugh across the room, effortlessly radiant. Every movement, every tilt of her head, every glance she shared with others struck me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't jealousy in the simple sense. It was more complicated, layered, admiration mixed with insecurity, affection entwined with desire I couldn't name. I realized I had been watching her all evening not just as my wife, but as a woman whose presence had the power to captivate attention, to hold the room without speaking loudly, to command respect with subtle grace. And that power, it made me ache. Not in anger, not in fear, but in a quiet, internal longing that was both thrilling and terrifying. I retreated to a corner again, more for clarity than avoidance. My mind wandered back over the years we'd shared, how she had guided me when I was uncertain, how her confidence had challenged me to grow, how her laughter could disarm my worst doubts. And now, seeing her admiration for her boss, I realized something essential. I wasn't just protective of her affection, I was drawn to her brilliance, her experience, her strength, in ways I hadn't fully acknowledged. Every small detail became magnified. The subtle curve of her smile, the way her eyes lit up in conversation, the way she held herself with a combination of authority and ease, it all played against the backdrop of my own youthful inexperience. I noticed the soft sway of her dress, the gentle cadence of her laughter, the warmth of her perfume lingering in the air around her. And I couldn't stop myself from wondering how much of this magnetism was just who she was, and how much of it was now refracted through the lens of my own emotional vulnerability. I realized then that my inner conflict wasn't about betrayal or mistrust. It was about perception, desire, and the challenge of reconciling admiration with intimacy. I loved her deeply, yet my awareness of her appeal, to everyone around her, to me in ways both innocent and profound, created a tension I hadn't anticipated. It was a strange mix, pride in being her partner, awe at her presence, and a whisper of longing for the closeness we sometimes set aside in the day-to-day. The night continued around me, clinking glasses and soft music threading through the conversations. And yet, I was consumed by this internal dialogue, tracing every gesture she made, every laugh, every glance. It was like seeing her through a magnifying lens, noticing dimensions I hadn't before, her resilience, her charm, her subtle vulnerabilities that only she allowed glimpses of. By the time I finally set down my glass, I understood something crucial. This wasn't a night about jealousy, or even about insecurity. It was about recognition, recognizing her complexity, my own responses, and the deep emotional bond we shared. The inner conflict wasn't a barrier, it was a mirror, reflecting both my admiration for her and my commitment to understanding the layers of our relationship. And in that reflection, I realized that this tension, if navigated carefully, could become a bridge, a way to deepen our connection beyond the superficial, beyond the ordinary. The party had started to wind down. Laughter softened into murmurs, the music grew gentler, and glasses clinked less frequently. I found her leaning slightly against the railing near the corner of the room, a half-smile playing on her lips as she watched the remaining guests. There was something vulnerable in her posture that pulled me in, an invitation, unspoken, to finally bridge the tension that had been building all evening. I approached, careful to keep my tone neutral but honest. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice quiet enough to remain private amid the lingering celebration. She nodded, a subtle inclination of her head, and we stepped slightly aside, to a small alcove near the balcony door. The faint scent of her perfume trailed behind her, comforting, familiar, yet now tinged with the electric tension of anticipation. I began, struggling to find the words that could convey both my love and the unease gnawing at me. "I need to be honest about what I felt tonight. When you gave that toast, and praised your boss the way you did, I felt uneasy. I realized how much I notice everything about you, the way you move, the way you laugh, the way you make people feel seen." And seeing that attention directed elsewhere, my voice faltered. It stirred something in me I didn't expect. She looked at me, soft eyes reflecting concern and patience. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing the back of my hand in a gesture that was light but grounding. "I understand," she said gently. "I didn't realize it would affect you that way. I meant no harm, he's just someone I've learned from professionally. My admiration for him isn't about us, or about diminishing what we have." Her words were calm, sincere, and yet the warmth of her touch carried a quiet reassurance that resonated through me. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a different, more vulnerable awareness. The intimacy we'd built over time was deeper than any fleeting insecurity. I think," I continued, exhaling slowly, "that part of what unsettled me is realizing how much I admire you, not just as my wife, but as a person. And sometimes, seeing your brilliance and confidence reminds me how much I still want to grow with you, to understand you, to be worthy of your presence." Her lips curved into a small, tender smile, and she leaned just slightly closer, close enough that our shoulders brushed. "And I feel the same," she admitted softly. "I want you to know how much I rely on you, how much your support means." Tonight, it reminded me that even in moments of admiration for others, it's you I turn to. It's always been you. For a long moment, we didn't speak. Our hands hovered near each other, brushing occasionally, a subtle but meaningful connection. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the soft pulse of her presence against mine, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. Words weren't necessary, the intimacy, the understanding, and the reassurance flowed between us silently, deeper than any toast or conversation could convey. By the time we returned to the crowd, the tension that had dominated the evening was replaced by a quiet, unspoken understanding. We moved together, hands almost touching, hearts synchronized in a shared acknowledgement. Admiration and love could coexist, vulnerability could be met with trust, and the bond between us was resilient, unshaken by fleeting moments of external attention. That night, the emotional confrontation became more than resolution, it became a bridge to deeper connection, and a reminder that true intimacy thrives in honesty, patience, and the willingness to meet each other fully, even in the quietest, most delicate moments. By the time the party was winding down, the room had transformed from lively celebration to quiet reflection. Guests were saying their goodbyes, soft laughter and muted conversation fading into the night. The once bright string lights cast a warmer, more intimate glow, reflecting off the polished surfaces of the tables and the lingering sparkle of glasses. The soft hum of background music was now almost hypnotic, drawing the night into a peaceful, almost cinematic stillness. I found her standing near the balcony once again, leaning lightly against the railing, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the city lights beyond. There was a calm in her posture tonight, a quiet radiance that had nothing to do with the attention of others, but everything to do with the woman I had married. I approached slowly, noticing the subtle sway of her hair in the gentle breeze, the familiar curve of her lips as she glanced toward me. "Long night," she said, her voice low, warm, and intimate. The simple observation carried layers of meaning, acknowledgement of the tension, recognition of the emotions we had navigated, and a subtle invitation to connect. I nodded, feeling the weight of the evening settle softly in my chest, a mixture of relief, reflection, and gratitude. We stepped onto the balcony together, the cool night air brushing against our skin, carrying the faint scent of flowers and distant city life. I could feel the residual warmth from the room behind us, but out here, everything was quieter, slower, the perfect space for the moment we needed. We stood side by side, shoulders brushing lightly, our hands hovering close enough to feel each other's presence without rushing. "I'm glad we talked," I said quietly, my voice carrying both sincerity and tenderness. Tonight could have felt complicated, but instead, it's reminded me of why I love you, and how much I value what we share. She looked up at me, eyes shining with a mixture of affection and understanding, and reached out to lightly take my hand. The touch was gentle but grounding, sending warmth through me, softening the edges of all the tension that had built over the evening. "I love you too," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "And I hope you know, nothing, no admiration, no fleeting attention, could ever change that." For a moment, we just stood there, hand in hand, taking in the night. The cool breeze tangled slightly in her hair, the distant city lights twinkling like stars, and the rhythm of our breathing seemed to align naturally. There was no need for dramatic declarations, no urgency, only the quiet, mutual acknowledgement of our bond, deeper and more resilient than any social moment could challenge. As we watched the last guests leave and the lights dim further, a profound calm settled between us. I felt a gentle squeeze of her hand, a lingering warmth, and the subtle but unmistakable reassurance that we were together, fully present, secure, and aware of the strength of our connection. The evening had started with tension, with uncertainty, and with the unspoken shadows of admiration and desire. But it ended with clarity, intimacy, and a reaffirmation of trust. We lingered a moment longer, letting the city hum beneath us, hands still entwined. In that quiet resolution, I realized that the night had given us more than a celebration, it had given us a mirror into our emotional depth, a reaffirmation of our love, and the knowledge that even in complexity, we were stronger together. With a shared smile, we stepped back inside, hearts lighter, connected, and ready to move forward, together, fully secure, and with a bond that no external admiration could ever shake.